So we're going to talk about cultivating talent. But first of all, mobile. For all of you that are not connected to your Twitter feed, BlackBerry was just purchased today for $4.7 billion. You talk about talent and maybe lack of talent and the concept of creative destruction. A company that was worth $80 billion and owned a market. And now look where it is. And Yaz, I loved your presentation, but yes, money matters. Money's good, not a big red X. I am thrilled to be here in front of all of you. Atlanta has been such a wonderful community to me and to Airwatch and to Manhattan Associates. And having built two big businesses here, you'd think I know something about cultivating talent, about building businesses. In 20 minutes, you may question that, but I'm going to do my best up here. So how did I get here? What I want to do is tell you my story and, research, all this academic stuff and the Harvard grads. I just take a little different approach to it. It's about tenacity. It's about passion about what you do. It's about being that chihuahua on the pant leg and just never giving up. And that's what entrepreneurship is about. It's about, in some ways, what Collab is about. Bringing people in here, putting you in an environment to mingle with people and get a spark. And the spark is what matters. The spark isn't something that is an event. It's a spark that changes you for the long term. I was a nerdy kid. A really nerdy kid. I wasn't that good looking. I wasn't that smart. I wasn't that talented. I wasn't a great athlete. And yet I ended up wrestling. And you say, what the heck does wrestling have to do with entrepreneurship? Well, I only learned one move. And every coach who I played against told the guy, look, he's going to go after your left leg. Everyone I ever wrestled against knew I was going to grab your left leg. And they would take their leg and put it back here. And damn if I didn't find a way to get to that left leg. It's not about doing lots and lots of things well. It's about finding something you do well. My junior year, I figured out that one move and I did better than anybody expected me to do. I didn't really take it that seriously, but I took it pretty seriously that year. But boy, my senior year, that was my junior year. My senior year, I ran 5 miles every day. I said, darn it, I'm going to figure this sport out. If nothing else, I'm going to be in the best shape. And I went undefeated during the regular season. I learned tenacity. There was a spark, something that hit me that said, darn it, I'm going to put everything I've got into this, and I'm not going to accept no. And what I probably didn't know I learned at that time was that there's lots of ways to be successful. I know people that are funny, that are great speakers, that aren't great speakers, that are very introverted. I know people that are gregarious. I know people that are ethical. I know people that aren't ethical. All successful and in many different ways. But the one thing they all had in common was tenacious. Thomas Edison had a way of saying this. He said, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. When I first started my first company, I read an interesting obituary. I was pretty young at the time, living in Los Angeles. And it was a man who had sold insurance for 60 years. And they said he probably had sold more insurance in his life than anybody ever did. And they said he was not a very assuming man. He was short, not very articulate, but that he had developed a skill and a communication to his customer. And he practiced it and worked it, and he had done the same presentation for 60 years. And he connected with the customer about risk. And he had a little flip chart, and he opened up his flip chart, and on the first page, he had 2 pennies taped to it. And he said, if something happens to your family for just 2 cents a day, and he flipped to the next, and he had a $100 bill pasted, we can afford you this type of protection for your loved ones. And he had worked and worked and worked at building this, and I realized that, again, it's about practice. It's about working those presentations and skills. Not that he was a great presenter, not that I've ever considered myself a great presenter. But what I learned is Jim Collins, I think, summed it up with a great expression where he says, in this life, there's two kinds of people. There's foxes and there's hedgehogs. And foxes are good at lots of things. They're smart and witty and they can talk on every topic. And hedgehogs are those people that do one thing really well. They dig in and they figure it out. And they're relentless about figuring it out. And generally in life, hedgehogs are the ones that become ultra successful with that focus and determination. Bobby Knight had a great expression. Not that we can all agree on Bobby Knight, except this expression I think we can, where he said, every player I ever coached had the will to win. Very few had the will to practice to win. Everybody wants to shine on the day that they're on stage. Everybody wants to throw in the basketball to win the game. But the people that are there Saturday morning and late Friday night throwing basketballs are the ones. Starting a company isn't about the glory, it's about the willingness to do anything and everything it takes. And I've got an interesting philosophy about businesses themselves. The expression, every hand's a winner and every hand's a loser. I'm a firm believer in this. I don't think there's a bad business. It's what you do with the business. When you look at retail, every year, the oldest industry in the world, and there are successful retailers, people who take a slightly different slant on the way they did it. I look at my first company, Manhattan Associates, and it didn't start doing, per se, supply chain management. We got involved in printing pick tickets and a little bit that we knew about warehousing, and we listened to the customer. And we morphed, and we morphed, and we morphed, and we morphed, and we figured it out. When you look at my current company, AirWatch, we started out as a public Wi-Fi company. If any of you open your laptop in a Panera Bread, we authenticate you. We run the knock. But it morphed, and we said, this is an okay business, but not great, but we got into mobile device management, into securing smartphones and tablets. We pivoted, and suddenly went from 30 to 1,500 people in 3 years. I'm a firm believer that 90% of life is just showing up. Find something you're passionate about and get great at it. I think about when Steve Jobs returned to Apple. You talk about a guy who had life stacked up against him. He was walking into the company with the second best PC operating system in the world. Who cared? He had 50 product lines that were not making money. And did he say, gee, I've been dealt a really bad hand? No. He took a step back and he said, what do we do well? What does our customer really want us to do? And he went back to a 10-year-old idea, the Newton, and said, this is really what this company should be doing in mobile. And caused BlackBerry to be sold today at 5% of what its worth was just a few years ago. Hedgehogs figure it out. It's not about the starting point, it's about the end point. And there is no bad starting point. So to tell you a little bit about my story, I ended up in Atlanta back in 1987, really just for a short period of time, but I started with a company out of college called Kurt Salmon Associates. And got fortunate to do a project called Quick Response, which was re-engineering the retail supply chain. I didn't know how that was going to affect my life, and I was a good student, got in with a good job, passed through here for a few months, went up to New Jersey, and I ran into developers from India. Back in 1988 and 89, well, that sounds so commonplace today. That wasn't nearly as common back then. So I started working with these developers from India. I started to think about the idea of a company, and I ended up leaving KSA and starting a company about leveraging Indian development. Knowing that I wanted to develop a product, but not really sure what product it was that we were going to develop. And then a little twist happened, which was my first set of partners came in one day and said, gee, Alan, we think the economics of this business are completely wrong. Even though you founded it, we think the economics should be we get most of it. And I tried and tried and tried to convince them of the errors of their way, but they would have none of that. So I decided that the next best thing, I looked at them and I said, well, great, I can tell you how to have 100% of this company. And I got up and I walked out and started all over again with a new set of partners. And I learned the challenges of ambiguity and of not really direct, clear communications. So we started again. We started this company. I get some customers. We're doing contract programming. Not a lot of developments coming out of India. And every time I call one of my partners there, he says, well, I couldn't pick up the phone. I was putting kerosene in the generator. So I went to India to try to figure out what exactly is going on. And this is a picture I took outside of our office. And I said, ooh, this is a tough place to get stuff done. We persevered, we banged away. We actually kept the office open until 95. We did shut that office. But reopened it later. But with that company, which I started in Manhattan Beach, California, for people who wonder where that name came from, we were there for 5 years, and it took us 5 years to go from a startup to 30 people. 4th of July weekend of 1995, which I'm sure all of you remember as the weekend of the Unabomber, which was the first time they ever asked you to have an ID when you got on a plane. And when you're traveling with 62 people from India and did not match any tickets to any people, that's a problem. We finally did get everybody on a plane sometime that weekend, moved over, and in 3 years, as we moved to Atlanta, we went from 30 to 800 people in public. The idea that you're an overnight success doesn't exist. It's the actor who's the overnight success after 10 years of dinner theater. It was working really, really hard during those 5 years, and I'm still going to say we are really blessed to have come to Atlanta. What a great community for an entrepreneur. What a great community to start a technology company. Thank you. Jim Collins, I'm going to steal another one of his little analogies because a company can be a little bit like an egg that's going to hatch a chicken. To the outside and the people looking at the egg, it looks like nothing's going on. Then all of a sudden, that egg hatches and a chick comes out. And to the rest of the world, it's like newsflash. And on the front page of the news is egg, chicken comes out of egg miraculously. Happened in minutes. But if you're inside that egg, there's a lot more going on. There's sort of 6 or 12 weeks of a lot of activity happening that nobody ever saw. But it's that click that happens, and everybody then takes note. We were blessed to have moved to Atlanta. We came here for time zone, for the airport, for the great educational system here. Today, that company is about 2,500 people with 1,000 here, doing fantastic, and I took a pause in my life. Stepped off the board, and then I moved on board. I actually moved onto a boat. My wife had just gotten pregnant. We bought a boat. We lived on it. I was retired and happy. And one of my first employees from that company, Manhattan Associates, who I'd always stayed friendly with, came and visited me. He was fighting with his partner and talked me off that boat to go back to work. Now there's a salesman. So next thing I knew, I've got another company and we're working hard. And this is our office today. So when I joined, it was a Wi-Fi company, and we did a pivot into mobile device management and security. We kiddingly say we only sell to companies that use phones. That could be any of you out there. And my history was important. The fact that at Manhattan Associates, we had managed a lot of mobility. When you think about a warehouse, when you think about the Coke delivery driver, that's those old mobile devices that are the precursor of the modern smartphone. And it was at 20 years at Manhattan Associates of recognizing that mobile was death by 1,000 cuts. Every device needs to be configured and secured and supported. And God bless BlackBerry, but they prove that everybody better get their email every day or they get really grumpy. I am still the IT manager of my own house, and I will tell you when my wife doesn't get email, I have a really bad night at home. I cannot get rid of that job. And you multiply that problem by 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000, and it's a really thankless job. But secondly, our development team over at Manhattan Associates had developed systems for customers like Walmart. So when we set out to solve this problem, it wasn't how do we manage 1,000 devices on an appliance. We didn't copy what BlackBerry had done. We didn't just follow in someone else's footsteps, as most of the people were doing at this time. And this is only a few years ago. We set out to build this for the largest, most scaled organizations in the world. Today, our customers are everybody from Walmart to the Supreme Court, ATF, FBI, Department of Justice, US courts, the House of Representatives, Shell, Chevron, Exxon, Saudi Aramco, 9 of the top 10 retailers. All of this has happened here in Atlanta over the last few years. And anybody who says we need anything more in Atlanta to be successful, we can use more of everything, don't get me wrong, but we have an awful lot right here. Mobile is wildly exciting, and it's your chamber's mission to make Atlanta a center for mobility. It is changing the way people do everything. I mean, when I used to go to a dinner party with my first company and talk about picking, packing, and shipping, I could be the loneliest guy in the room in 15 minutes, but boy, you pull this thing out and start hacking somebody's phone, you get their attention real quick. It is changing everything. It is changing the way we find our friends, the way we do our work, the way we do our jobs, the way we educate our children. We are involved in a project at LAUSD, the LA Unified School District. They're floating a $1 billion bond to buy 650,000 tablets to educate children. We're working with Intel to roll 1 million devices out in Lebanon and possibly 10 million in Turkey. You take a textbook today and a child doesn't understand what he reads in it, he's dead. What can he do? Look at the picture. You take an electronic textbook and click on the picture, and you're going to get a multimedia learning experience in that child's language, honed to that child's learning style, from the greatest communicator and instructor of that particular subject in that language. The ability to take this technology and do things with it in telemedicine, in corporate communications, in sales, it's really revolutionizing things. So I feel really blessed to have gotten into mobile, but the old saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get. But again, not the overnight success. We started in 2006 dealing with those ruggedized devices, and it wasn't easy. And by 2010, we had 50 employees, and then a funny thing happened. iOS 4 got released, and this was our growth path. Those are quarters, not years. Over the course of 3 years, going from 50 to 1,500 people, we just recently, and by the way, at the size of this market, hoping to be 15,000 people within a few more years. May not be us, but someone in this industry should support a 15,000 person company. We did a $200 million Series A funding, possibly the largest Series A technology funding for 15% of our company. And I say that starting a company the second time, it's like watching a murder mystery movie the second time. The first time, you're just trying to figure out who did it. The second time, you know how it ends. You can be so much smarter about what you do. But what I found in both of these companies is that the most important thing we do is recruit. I spend an inordinate amount of my time helping find the right people. We say there's 3 kinds of people in the world. The ones that if you ask them to do something, they can't do it and nobody wants them. There's a second type of person that if you tell them what to do, they're going to figure it out. They're going to get it done for you. There's a third type of person that you don't have to tell. You point them in the right direction and they figure it out. And the only way you go from 50 to 1,500 people is to have that third type of person. Let them do their jobs. Don't smother them. I like the expression. You don't buy a dog and then bark for it. You've got to let the people do their jobs. I hope what you heard in some of that is that success is not random. It's a combination of hard work and luck. And there's a great book by Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers, that gives some examples of Bill Gates, who, while he was brilliant and hardworking, had access to some of the very few computers at the time. And the hockey players that are born in January, February, March, because the cutoff when you're 7 years old becomes so important to your success. And what Malcolm said is what we do as a community and as a society and for each other matters as much as what we do for ourselves. And that's what CoLab's all about, getting the spark to do something important. Warren Buffett once said, somebody's sitting in the shade of a tree because someone planted a tree a long time ago. You need to thank that person. And this is what we're doing here yesterday and today at CoLab, getting together, planting seeds so that this community thanks us in the future for the things that we come out of here with. And the only parting remark I have is to any of you, get that spark, follow that passion, and do something wonderful for Atlanta and the Southeast. Thank you very much.